if you're able to operate from that place of meaning for yourself, you're always going to figure out a way to do good work in the world. And from that place can come the relentlessness that it takes to change your career path, which, we've both done several times. Like it takes a lot of vigor, and I have felt like it was worth it every single time.
Hi guys, welcome to Response Able with Professor Nikki James. I mean, louder is better.
I think so.
Because then we can yell. I feel like I have a fake loud voice. Because if I actually screamed right now, I would be super loud. Hi everybody, welcome back to the Response Able podcast. Today I get to introduce you to one of my friends and colleagues, Heatherjean MacNeil. Heatherjean and I are professors together at Northeastern University's DeMoore-McKim School of Business. As we've gotten to know each other over the last several years, it's become quite apparent that we are very similar. We're both incredibly passionate about social entrepreneurship, both starting our own ventures in our early career, and have now transitioned into supporting and enabling others passionate about leadership and social entrepreneurship. I'm really excited to introduce you to Heatherjean and for you to hear some of her story today. I think she is someone that thinks and reflects on life and who she is and how she wants to make an impact, and then works out step by step, day by day, how to get there, which I find really inspiring. So let's jump into the episode with Heatherjean MacNeil. I love it. Well, welcome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending the time. We're in the beautiful Maine. I was about to say Maine, New Hampshire, which is hilarious. I'm back in the US now. I need to get my US geography right. We're in Maine, in Freeport, Maine. Maine is a state, and it's beautiful. There is beautiful green trees outside. We are in this wouldn't be called the country, right? It's what would you call this?
I would say we're in the country. We're kind of in a special sector of the country because we're by the bay, but we're in the woods.
We're in the woods. I think
we're in the woods
in Maine.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to describe it. But yes, so Heatherjean, who is my amazing colleague at Northeastern University, my first question for you is, who are you? Just a small one to get started.
Who am I? The existential question.
Mm-hmm.
Are you looking for me to answer this from a professional lens or literally whatever comes to mind?
Whatever comes to mind.
Okay.
We are beyond our professional persona.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This is a great question because, I study and think about identity a lot in the way that it informs how we show up, how we do our work. So let's see. Well, most recently I became a professor of organizational behavior. So I'm really passionate about thinking about how people work together and how their own personal identities influence how they show up, how they get along, how they don't get along. I'm a mom, became a mom several years ago. I have 3 kids, twin boys that are 8, 6-year-old daughter. That takes a lot of my time.
Mm-hmm. And twins right out of the gate.
Twins out of the gate. Yeah.
No 1-to-2 ratio.
That's right. Yeah. With a surprise third. So it was definitely an adventure. And yeah, I'm an avid reader of fiction. If you need any book recommendations, I breezed through my list this summer. I grew up on an organic farm, so I still kind of identify as a farmer/food activist at heart. Mm-hmm. I consider myself a social entrepreneur in a lot of ways, always thinking about how to bring about positive social change through entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial thinking. I try to be a good friend. I try to show up with kindness every day.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah.
So good. Okay, so what we're going to explore today is how you became that identity that you are today, essentially, and the person that you are in the world, because I think that journey is really different for everybody. And I love that through the podcast, I get to show lots of people's different stories and different journeys. And I feel like, and what I hope, I guess, is for people listening that they will see that there is so many other options than going the standard pathway, and that it all does work out and you can build a really awesome life that might look a little bit different and that might be a little bit of a windy road, but no road is truly straight anyway. So yeah, with that in mind, my second question is, what did you study and what did you actually graduate in?
Yeah, this might surprise you. My undergraduate degree was in ethnobotany and photography.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. So I went to a very small alternative liberal arts school in Vermont called Marlborough College. It has since tragically closed, got acquired by Emerson.
Okay.
And it was a design your own major kind of intensive study type of place. And so I went in with a interest in sustainable agriculture, became very interested in kind of tropical ecology and ethnobotany, which is the study of how people use plants. Spent a year in Ecuador doing a research study on how indigenous populations use plants in this tiny sector of rainforest in the northeast part of the country. Yeah, I built a demonstration garden when I was there with a local community that kind of showcased some of the plants that were being used medicinally locally. And the focus of my thesis was looking at different plant products that could be grown and harvested sustainably from rainforest areas as a way of a conservation strategy. So you can think about acai and different products that you can grow in tropical environments as a way to support communities economically.
Instead of having to cut the rainforest down to make space for other things.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. I did a big photography project based on my time there. And so I think my degree was international studies, ethnobotany, and photography. Okay. A very Marlborough College type of, for those that are listening that are familiar with Marlborough, very Marlborough. Yeah. And it was through that experience actually that I became really interested in thinking about the tension between environmental conservation and economic sustainability for local populations. So from there, I joined the Peace Corps. I ended up working in the agricultural program for 2 years in Honduras. And through that experience, worked with women in the community where I was staying to start chicken cooperatives.
Tell me a fun fact about a chicken that I wouldn't know. Putting you on the spot there, so if you can.
I learned so much about chickens through that experience. And one of the reasons that was it was such a gift to me to work on that project was that, I would probably say throughout Central America, throughout Latin America, everyone has chickens, right? Chickens are kind of part of the family. People raise chickens alongside the home. And so it was cool because everyone had something to share or teach you about raising chickens. Okay. And I, through the project, I learned how they grow, and then obviously the butchering process, the harvest process, the butchering process, and then kind of the value add process that can happen with the meat. So they raise the chickens, we slaughtered the chickens, and then they would make fried chicken and different products that would be sold within the local communities. Okay. So I don't know. I lived that process over those 2 years. I would say one thing I can say about chickens is they are pretty docile. You can pick them up and cuddle them if you so desire.
They're just super chill.
They're super chill. They just have great vibes. I love being around people with their chickens. Yeah. So it was through that process that I became really interested in entrepreneurship, which is how I ended up going in a business direction. I remember it being pretty scandalous for my family members when I was like, I'm going to go to business school. They were like, what? They wouldn't say it out loud. They would be like, yeah, Heatherjean's going to grad school.
You would see it on their face.
Yeah. So I did an all-women's MBA program in Boston at Simmons University. It was a super special experience. And through my Peace Corps experience, became really interested in the cooperative model because I saw the way that it could just work as a viable economic model, but also the idea of people coming together collaboratively and governing their business collaboratively, to me, felt like almost like a beacon of hope kind of within this capitalistic system. I just felt like it was a really viable model that I believed in. And so during business school, I incubated for myself a business that came to life called Proxy Apparel, where I worked with artisans, mostly in Central America. So spent a lot of time on the ground in Guatemala, Nicaragua, Honduras. We did some sourcing from South America, actually worked with some worker-owned factories in the south of the U.S., and we put out several collection of women's clothing and accessories. So again, had this vision for Proxy, had no experience in fashion design, no experience, similar in some ways to the chickens, no experience in manufacturing, and just kind of immersed myself and learned how I went. And honestly, was just taught by some incredible people in the field. And so focused on sort of sustainable fashion as the next chapter that kind of came out of my grad school experience.
Okay. So my question for you there is, one of the things that I find in my classroom, and you perhaps do too and can comment on this, is that I have students in my classroom that really genuinely are passionate about starting something, making an impact or whatever, but they caveat that often with, but I need experience first. I don't know everything yet. Whereas I feel like what I'm hearing you explain from your story is that you learned on the job and as you went. So what are the skills and maybe like mindsets or like behaviors that you had that you think enabled you to like start not knowing and acquire what you needed along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways when you're starting your career, there can be a boldness about you, right? Like I think when you're starting out, and for me there was very much kind of an inhibition, and I think because at the underbelly of everything I've done in my career, I have had like passion. Usually there's a social activist component, like things that really tap into my kind of core of being and belief system. And so I think it's like from that place where I find myself operating. I mean, I even feel like that to this day. And so I think like doing the inner work to be in touch with the things that you really believe in, that you really want to do, and using that as a place of confidence. And not even confidence, like fuel, right? So anyone that's ever started a business or started an organization, I think even if you bring a lot of expertise to the table, there are endless things to learn, experiment with, figure out. And so there has to be joy for you in that aspect of figuring it out. It doesn't mean you're going to enjoy everything, right? So there's plenty of aspects of like the job that we have to do, right? I think everyone has those elements, but I think like building the muscle of like that inner compass is super important. I also feel, I think the way that we're socialized around going from A to B to C, and, I always felt really privileged, like in some ways because I was fostered on a organic farm in my teenage years. So I had a pretty alternative kind of childhood, adolescent experience.
Yeah.
During the time that I spent on the farm, I was exposed to a lot of social entrepreneurship, a lot of people pursuing their passions. I didn't really have any conventional pressure around like, you have to pursue a traditional path, or a pressure to feel like I had to do a particular thing. And so for me, that's kind of a silver lining I've taken from my personal path, is that I have always felt inclined to pursue the things that I was really passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want that for our students too.
Yeah.
And not to devalue like the support and the different ways that our identities are informing the way that we choose career path, right? I think there are a lot of complicated intersectional factors that influence that.
Mm-hmm.
But we spend a lot of time at work.
True.
I spend more time working than I spend with my family, and I want to make sure that that what I'm doing brings a lot of meaning to me. And so, sorry, I feel like I'm going off on a tangent, but
No, that's good advice.
I think if you're able to operate from that place of meaning for yourself, you're always going to figure out a way to do good work in the world. And from that place can come the relentlessness that it takes to change your career path, which, we've both done several times. Like it takes a lot of vigor, and I have felt like it was worth it every single time.
Yeah. I think one of the things I can't remember explicitly what you mentioned, but you mentioned the joy in the working it out.
Yes.
And I think that's really important. And one of the things that I say a lot of the time when my students talk about like being anxious about what the future looks like, I mean, there is obviously a clinical anxiety, but there is also anxiousness that kind of the future. But apparently, and I will have to get Nora to fact check this for me, anxiety and excitement kind of operate the same in the brain, or you might be able to confirm or deny that. That's what I've heard. And it's how we put the word to it, or that experience that we're feeling, right? And so we can look at it and go, I'm anxious, or we can look at it and go, no, actually, I'm excited. Like I'm nervous, yes, but I'm actually like excited about that. And I think that's kind of that positive framing, not performative framing, but that genuine, there's some like nervousness here because I haven't done it and I don't know how it's going to work out. But there is an element of an excitement and joy in the process of like trying and solving the problems and all of that sort of thing. So yeah, super interesting. Okay, so how did you get from, and was it an MBA? You said at Simmons
MBA, yeah.
University. So, and then you started a fashion label. Again, you referred to having a similar, like quite divergent career like me, which is definitely true. So how did you get from there to, deciding to do a PhD? And then landing where you are right now today as a professor alongside me at Northeastern.
Yeah. So I built Proxy for about 5 or 6 years, learned the ropes, would be happy to talk to anyone at any point about that experience. Built supply chains, raised money, had lots of successes. I eventually got to the point with Proxy where I was exhausted. I'd slept on couches, maxed out credit cards. In full transparency, I'd met my now husband/life partner, and so decided to shut the business down. I took a position at Babson College working with a longtime mentor to build a women's accelerator program. So at the time, there was a lot of research and investigation going on around why there weren't more women founders, more women entering into entrepreneurial spaces. And so I decided to land there and build a program that would support women founders. I did that for several years.
That's really cool. So you could take the experience of Proxy, but trying to work it out and realizing that there was a lot of resources and knowledge and gaps that you didn't know, and then create a system that would support others. That's super powerful.
Yeah. And I had a lot of gendered experiences as a female founder operating in Boston, first time entrepreneur, building an international business. I felt like I faced a lot of bias and just walked into a lot of spaces that I felt like were very much favoring a particular archetype of entrepreneur that I didn't align with. So I had a lot of passion for thinking about ways to create more inclusive spaces for founders. So we started that program at Babson, eventually expanded it into Boston, partnering with the mayor's office. So we created seats within the program for Boston-based women founders, eventually received a large grant and brought the program, which was called the Win Lab, into the Miami ecosystem, and so scaled the program there, which was super fun. I loved my time in Miami working within the innovation ecosystem down there. So did that for 6 or 7 years, had a great team I was working with at Babson. I think at this point, the program is still going. We've graduated hundreds and hundreds of founders, many, many success stories. So yeah, I just during that time, like really indulged my passion for entrepreneurship, teaching entrepreneurship. I was working at the Center for Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership. They also run the Diana Research Institute. So I was mentored there by Candy Brush, one of the kind of founding researchers of the women's entrepreneurship field, and became very inspired by faculty that I was working with at Babson around research and the role that it has to play in creating more equity in entrepreneurship. At the time, decided to transition. I got pregnant with my twins and decided I wanted to do something different and just decided to go for the PhD. At the time, I was kind of approaching the PhD as a kind of life experience that I had always wanted for myself. I mean, coming from a family, first person to go to college, really feeling like, wow, like I could have a life where I get to go and like study more and do another thesis dissertation project. Also became really part of the impetus for my research at the time was cannabis was starting to become legal in Colorado, Washington, and there were these national headlines saying that cannabis could be the first billion-dollar industry dominated by women. So I became really curious about what was happening in the cannabis space. Newsweek, Time, like major media outlets were saying that, and I was like, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Why are women going into cannabis? What would it be like to have a billion-dollar industry run by women? Like, could you imagine?
Yeah.
Like, whoa. So I just became really interested and curious. That was kind of my research question going into the dissertation process. And I found an amazing program, went over to UMass Boston to work with Banu Azak-Pan, who was there in the Organizations and Social Change PhD, which is, again, like a very unique program that felt very me, very values aligned, amazing faculty. So, yeah, I lived in Savin Hill and rode my bike to class and strapped my babies on my back sometimes and
amazing.
Brought them over to campus. And yeah, the twins were 6 months when I started. So I was there for 3.5 years, did the degree. My dissertation focused on the emerging market in Massachusetts. It was very timely because the legislation had just passed to legalize marijuana in the state of Massachusetts. So I was on the ground. I did kind of an ethnographic study of how the market was forming and really approaching it from an equity lens of who's getting into the industry, why Massachusetts developed some kind of leading social policy around supporting entrepreneurs of color, diverse entrepreneurship within that space. And so I studied that for 3 years, done some writing about it, and then decided I did want to kind of double down in the higher ed space and look for a faculty position. It's funny. I'm very much like an intuitive decision maker, which I think for some people, I'm married to a very like analytical lawyer who doesn't make intuitive decisions. But for me, a lot of times I kind of vision where I'm going next. Like it either comes to me or I do kind of tune into my internal world. When I was visioning my job, I was definitely kind of rooted. I've been rooted in Boston, and since having my family and grandparents and community and everything, knew that I wasn't leaving Boston, which, as everybody knows on the academic job market, if you're geographically bound, it can be very challenging. But I had this vision of like working at a place where I could ride my bike to, that was very dynamic, obviously in an urban context, and eventually kind of knew that was Northeastern, had been kind of part of that bigger vision. And so the opportunity kind of came to be. But again, like very much just kind of fit this new vision I had for myself, sort of working in higher ed as a professor.
Yeah, I think that intuition is quite important. I think I'm very much the same. I was just saying to a friend last night, I made a comment and then all of a sudden went, no, I'm sorry. I don't have the time to tell you right now all the data points that I've kind of pulled together with my instinct to make that comment. So like, just wait until we catch up and then I'll explain fully. Otherwise, I'm just going to confuse the heck out of you, right? And I think that that's my way of saying, like, I'm an intuitive decision maker and thought, like, that's how I get to my answer. Whereas I have a lot of people in my life that are very analytical. And when I go, hey, I think this. They're like, what? And then I've got to spend like 30 minutes pulling all the like little pieces of data that I've slowly been building to make my intuitive decision to make it kind of a little bit make sense for them. And I think for me, like one of the things that was really interesting for me when you were speaking, I'm also a first generation university graduate in Australia, and I had from a very young age said I wanted to be a doctor, not a medical doctor, but I didn't even know how that was, but I just had this sense that that was going to be available to me. And it was something that I wanted. I had no idea what I was going to study, when it was going to come on the table, but I just had the sense that that was what I was going to be able to do and something that I wanted. And so, yeah, I think because I didn't necessarily have a pathway in front of me in my familiar line, I had to intuit how to get where I
That's
was
right.
going. And so I've developed that capability to be able to do that. And I think that that serves me really well in this phase. And it sounds like it serves you really well, especially because as researchers, it's essentially our job to like produce new knowledge, to be curious about things that nobody understands and try and understand it in a structured way so that we can present those ideas to others and then bring it into our classroom. So we do have a job that really aligns with our skill set, which is pretty incredible. So, yeah. So my next question for you is, we've been talking all about your journey and all of the things that you've done along the way, and it's 3 careers so far, would you say?
I would say that's,
Yeah.
yeah, more or less.
Yeah. What are some of the skills or like kind of mindsets that you feel like you've developed throughout that process or that have been useful in all of those? Because I know for me, one of the things that I comment on all the time is I've had more careers than my dad had jobs, I think. And that's only going to accelerate, I would say, in the next generation. So, like, what are those things that you could acquire in one space that you feel like have really helped you as you've transitioned?
Yeah, I think something that's really important that even students can at university or your early career, like thinking about what are the aspects of work that you're really passionate about, really drawn to, that really pull you in. And for me, that thread has always been people. Like I'm a highly relational person. I thrive on relationships. I like community building. I like convening, where I get my energy from. I'm kind of classic extrovert that way, which to me kind of makes sense because it was always the thread through my entrepreneurial experiences, bringing teams together, working to kind of manifest big events. I love doing it in entrepreneurial context too, because usually, you don't have a lot of resources. And so you really rely on people in profound ways. And now, like, getting to do research on people within organizational contexts is, I feel like, such a gift. But so I really pride myself on thinking about my people skills and my leadership skills. And again, I think those are skills really that come through experience, right? But I think thinking about the skills that go along with working well with others, working well in teams, leading others, curiosity, empathy, leaning into conflict.
Ooh,
Yeah.
ouch.
I know. And then for people that are interested in personality assessments, like I'm an Enneagram 7, I'm an I in the DISC model. Like I'm very much into selling ideas, building energy around ideas. I think that's something that's kind of always been a driver for me and thinking about that thread. So, I think it's really important to do the internal work of understanding yourself in relation to others and then understanding like the strengths that you bring within a team or within a leadership context. Again, I think that's something that is a muscle you really strengthen over the course of your career in really interesting ways. But I think that work can start very early and should be consistent, and like thinking about creating spaces around you, lots of different kinds of spaces, friends, personal advisory board, mentors, sponsors, therapists, executive coach, life coach, sports. I don't know, like finding contexts where you can, trusted contexts where you can reflect on how you're showing up, conflict situations, trusted spaces where you can really process how you're sort of developing as a leader and as a team member. Yeah.
I like what you say there about like trusted spaces, right? Because it can't just be any space.
Definitely.
What would you say, like if somebody didn't know that distinction and know what that meant, like how would you kind of look at a space intuitively and kind of maybe test whether it's trusted or kind of make a judgment call on whether that's a space you can trust?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. I think it really comes down to vulnerability. So it's both like, where do I feel like I can show up and be vulnerable, where I feel seen so I can have constructive conversations, where I can be vulnerable and brainstorm and ideate and talk about my own internal processes. But then also, where is it appropriate for me to be vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
And so we all operate within different organizational contexts where we have to show up and present in a certain way where it's not always appropriate to be super vulnerable. And some it is, right? I think like psychological safety, which is something I'm very passionate about from a teaching and leadership perspective, very like salient topic, I would say, in the OB space, is something I think the world is kind of awakening to as being like really essential to making teams and organizations function well. Like people need to show up and be vulnerable. I think like you do want to find those trusted spaces really early where you can really share what's going on for you and brainstorm around situations and the best way forward. I mean, I'm 25 years into my career and I still have people that I call previous leaders or bosses that I've worked for. I got my besties. Like I feel like people that know me really well that can help me reflect and navigate. But I think like as early as possible, kind of establishing those spaces is really important.
Yeah. And it requires other people, right? I was listening into a leadership meeting last night, and the person that was speaking was saying, like, we have this tendency now to go to AI with that, right? And ask, what do I do? What does the theory say? But what the speaker was saying essentially was that you don't have the benefit of looking at the lived experience of that person making that decision in their own life when it's AI, right? It's basically a macro conglomerate of everybody's thoughts and all the research and human behavior. It isn't being able to go, oh, okay, so this person's giving this advice and I can see their life and how that way of operating in the world has outworked in their life. And so your kind of thoughts for me around like there's a lot of humans in that answer, friends, former colleagues, current colleagues, all that sort of stuff. It's the people that can be the mirror and be the sounding board, and knowing how to pick those right people in those right environments to be able to get people that are going to give you real feedback based on knowing you, knowing themselves, and you get to see their lived experience and whether you should trust them. So yeah, that's really interesting.
And I think too, like, I think AI can be a useful tool. Like I really like using it to figure out, like sometimes if I'm starting a big project, like to think through the steps, because that linear thinking is something I work at basically.
Yeah.
Feels like real work to me. But I think like the key aspect to that relationality piece is that like the emotional experience of what it means to connect and have growth conversations with humans in our life that we, respect or, even love, like that is part of the growth. Like that is actually an essential part of the process. Not that we can't get data from all different places, because we should, but that's a really crucial component.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I think there's something to be said about the power that I see in AI in that context, and being able to like go, okay, I'm dealing with this situation. What does the theory say? Like, not what does everybody say, but like, give me a theory grounded, like psych theory grounded response to what's going on here. And then you can aggregate that with the real life.
Love theory.
Experience. I mean, and yeah, I know.
As academics.
This is what we do, yo. But yeah, I mean, you've got to be careful, I would say. Like, had some pretty funny answers from ChatGPT when I've asked stuff, or Claude, or
Mm.
Google, or whatever. And then you're like, no, I want reputable sources, like from this person, this person, this person. I also, one time, which I thought was really funny, was asking for some information based on theory. And then I was like, oh, it doesn't sound like it's critical enough. And I said, I'd like you to be a little bit more critical with your response. I was asking this of one of the AI LLMs. And it came back like with a completely different answer. Like, it didn't have that ability to balance, like, critical doesn't mean negative, it means examined and well reasoned. And yeah, it was just really fascinating. But yeah, I think there's value in getting the data and the steps and the logic from something like an LLM. But yeah, the human side of it, I think, for me, is super important as well.
Mm-hmm.
Makes us better. All right. My final question is, you're an intuitive person, and you identified that earlier. So where do you see like, what's next? Where are we going from here? What does it look like?
Broadly, like future of work, or
Yeah, let's go future of work and then future of
okay,
Heatherjean.
great. Can I say one other thing back to the skill question? Because I
Absolutely.
guess off the right, I feel like maybe I'm giving woo woo answers just in them. I mean, I always give woo woo answers, but I was thinking about the way that you asked, like, what are the skills? And I love that you're drilling down on that. I also wanted to speak to the fact that, like, when you're making career pivots or you're diving into something that's very new to you, again, I think it goes back to, like, some people are very, for whatever their life story, their history, what's been role modeled for them, their personality, so many elements go into our threshold for risk.
Mhm.
You know, I'm going to assume people like us, I'll also just speak for myself, like, I have a pretty high, like, threshold for risk. Like, I'm fine making dramatic career changes. Like,
Mhm.
that's always, I kind of thrive in that space. For some people, they're going to thrive in a different kind of context, or they're going to need, like, a different path to get there, but it's still accessible. And so I always go back to, like, thinking about entrepreneurial thought and action as a way to think about starting new things, doing new things, right? Like, what are the immediate steps that I can take to move into the direction I'm trying to go, right? So let's say you decide that you want to become a fine art painter and open a shop on the North Shore of Massachusetts by the beach, right? Like, that would probably be a pretty dramatic career change, right? I don't know how to paint. I don't know about you, but, like, the idea of, okay, I'm going to take some painting classes, and on the weekends, maybe I'll read about, like, how do you price painting, or where are the communities of artists that are making their living doing that? Or, I just kind of pick something that I have no skill in, like, thinking about what are the ways that I can start to experiment to move toward the direction that I'm really interested in, or even to start a business, right? Like, what's one small pilot that I can do to kind of prove the concept? I think that mindset plays really well into your own personal life too, right? And I think when you think about, like, taking a dramatic leap, like, I just heard from one of my students last night. He sent me an update. He's landed his dream job in New York City, got an apartment in Queens, right? Like, I'm sure you get lots of emails like that. Northeastern students are amazing. But thinking about what were the steps and pathways that led up to achieving that, there's so many different tendrils, right? So it's overwhelming to think about, what would it take for me to move to New York and get X job? But I do think there are ways that you can move toward things without totally jumping without the parachute. And that's a skill, right? Being able to, like, step aside from the overwhelm, break it down. And again, going back to our initial conversation, like, use your advisory. Sure, use AI, right? Like, I think it actually could be a great tool for that. Talk to people that have done it. Always really important, right? So thinking about, like, entrepreneuring your way toward
That's
the big
really
vision,
cool. Yeah. I think the two words that are coming up, I think it's two, maybe it's three. But comfort with the small start, I think, is the way that the words that are coming up for me as you share that, because I think sometimes we feel like, especially within society today, where we're used to getting everything straight away and instantaneously, that comfort with the small start, right? I always say to the students, like, get your full-time job and carve out 10 hours a week to start working on something that will be a side hustle initially that eventually might be your business in 5 years' time, right? And things like that. So I interestingly am less comfortable with risk, but
Okay.
I have genuinely thought about this in my life. And I think my career is quite similar to you. I've started things myself. I've started not-for-profits. I've started for-profit businesses. And then I went into the process of, hey, I could actually do a really great job of like coaching and enabling other people to do this. It didn't feel like I wasn't taking risk. It was almost like I'm just
Yeah.
like having fun and doing this thing
Yeah.
and
Well, you
seeing
found
what
flow.
evolved.
Yeah.
Yeah, seeing what evolves. So when it did start feeling like risking and making those bigger jumps as I got through my career, what I had to work out is like what I needed to feel safe to take that risk. Right. And
Exactly.
I've worked out like I need a certain amount of like personal burn rate in my finances
Mm-hmm.
to take a risk. I need to know that I'm going to be okay for a certain period of time. And I notice that excitement turns to stress when that number goes down below that risk threshold. So again, coming back to your like know yourself.
Self-awareness. Yeah.
And knowing, oh, I'm operating out of stress now, not out of excitement. Why is that? Oh, it's because this threshold that I need to feel safe in this context that I've put myself in has gone down. And then I've had to learn that, I worked my way through college, being a first generation student, and I made coffee, made thousands and thousands, probably maybe even millions of coffees all the way through college. But there was multiple seasons in my life where I fell back on that to like cash flow my life. And I don't think those things that you do as an entrepreneur to keep making it work, we kind of forget that we did those things. Maybe because of the trauma, we kind of block it out. But it's like, and then young people come along and go, wow, you started all these things and all
I
that sort of
know.
stuff. And it's like,
The
yeah, but
hustle.
it wasn't profitable for 3 years. I was literally doing this thing. Like I used to teach as an adjunct professor, like to bankroll my social entrepreneurship habit.
I taught a marketing class at 9 p.m. at Bunker Hill Community College. 9 to midnight. Can you
Oh my
imagine?
gosh, that's wild.
So
But
memorable.
like there's so many of these
Yeah,
things
I
that we
know.
do and
Yeah,
have done.
that's right.
And I think, yeah, one of the lessons I've taken away from this conversation is, just know yourself, know what your threshold is, but then also like I want to get better at sharing. Not that I don't see it as the dark side of my entrepreneurial journey, but definitely the journey not as rosy and shorthanded as what I tend to tell it and speak to it now, but actually like saying, no, it's okay. Like maybe you are going to start something and maybe it is going to take 3 years to be profitable. And maybe you are going to have to work in a bar from midnight to 3 a.m. to like make that work for yourself. And that's not dissimilar to anybody else that doesn't have their parents' garage to start their company in.
I totally agree. I'm glad you're raising that point. I don't want to be too grandiose about this or too rose-colored glasses, but I think like, the entire time I was starting my business, I was completely broke. It's like what you're saying. Like I was doing consulting. I was doing all these strange jobs, putting all the money back into the business. I was sleeping on friends' couches. Like I didn't even have my own place to live during that time because I didn't feel like I could invest in rent, thinking about, maybe the darker side of entrepreneurship. But honestly, like I still look back on those years as the best years of my life.
Yeah.
Like the meaning behind actually like that level of like work and not having a lot of resources and leaning on your community, like I remember all the people that, would be like, I was broke. Like at the time, I was running my business. A really good friend of mine had done a bunch of fundraising for the Obama campaign, and she got invited to this private ceremony at the White House for Cinco de Mayo. And she was like, come to DC with me. We're going to meet the Obamas. And I was like, I have no money. In fact, my car was just stolen and it was full of inventory for my business. Like, I literally don't have money to get to DC. And, she's like, get in the car, we're going. And it's like, I think of all the people that supported me during those like hustle years, and I'm happily grab the check now when we go out to dinner, or like think about ways to pay it forward.
Yeah.
So not to over glamorize like what is in this, what becomes of the strife too, I think ends up being really meaningful. And like even the failure moments, right? Like I think about all the failed interviews or like experiences I see some of our students going through to try to, get the right co-op, get the right job. And like there's always value in those conversations and experiences, even though they don't initially, it doesn't feel good, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't feel good to be broke and to be like, I don't have money to go with you, but, or to ask and be vulnerable in that way. There's a lot of discomfort, but I think there's so much like character and growth that comes from those parts too.
Right.
Very easy to talk about in hindsight, of course.
Yes.
Full recognition. And I think it's true.
Yes. So good.
Yeah.
I love it so much. So in closing, we actually sidestepped the future question and went back a little bit, which is totally fine. I love awesome conversations that go all over the map. But what do you see like in the next few years for yourself? And then I think because you're in the unique position, like I am, being around students all day, but also having this curious, like future focused, intuitive way of working and operating, where do you see kind of things going that students might be able to use if they don't have that capability or skill set?
Yeah, I this might be more of a boring answer to kind of my own personal journey, because I think it might be the first time in my life where I actually feel content and like not having a huge future vision or like the next thing I'm chasing after, because I really do feel like I'm in flow. I feel really grateful. I love my job at Northeastern. I love teaching. I'm really invested in the research that I'm doing. I get so much from the campus environment. I get to ride my bike to work. I have a lot of flexibility to be with my family. I'm really focused on like how I'm spending time with my family outside of work, friends, travel, like a lot of elements of life that because I have been so career focused, I'm really trying to put a lot of time into. And I think that's really good for me. With that said, once my kids go off to college, my big dream is to like have some kind of bed and breakfast or retreat center, hopefully in Costa Rica, which is like my happy place, or some beautiful, ideally tropical environment, to keep kind of doing the human development work that I'm so invested in a private sort of like beautiful place context. So already thinking about, again, going back to our entrepreneurial thought and action, what are some steps I can take now to think about that? What's the financial plan behind that? How will that play out? Even though it's 15 to 20 years away at least. And, I think it's a really exciting time when it comes to future of work, change management, disruption. I think it's scary, but I also, like, from a human kind of systems thinking, human dimension, organizational behavior psychology perspective, I think actually the human elements of work are going to become more and more important in a lot of ways. Like when you think about what organizations are going through with AI adoption right now, we could even say this in relation to our own institution, right? Like, how are people coming together? Where is their consensus? Curiosity, empathy, all the ways, because organizations are going through massive transformation, right? Something that I'm just launched a new study on and just really interested in also is like Gen Z's influence on the workplace and all of the incredible, and one might argue misunderstood qualities that they're bringing into the context that's butting up against, us old millennials, Gen X, definitely boomers, like all kind of the norming and storming that's happening around intergenerational differences, I think is really interesting. I really hope that we're able to apply some of these new technologies to climate change. I think that's something I've been thinking a lot about, is just like the dramatic effects that climate change is having on the world right now. I don't think we're talking enough about. Maybe we're just all in shock about it. But, having just traveled in Europe this summer and like seeing it on fire, and drove through a wildfire for the first time on our road trip to Portugal, was like, I just think that we all need to elevate that conversation. And I know, of course, there's many people in the world doing incredible, bold work in that area. But again, like just kind of thinking about some of the more macro level social change elements to the world's problems and inequities.
Amazing.
Am I hitting on my response? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's probably another 2 hours
Yeah,
we could go
I know.
talking about and unpacking all those things, but we're going to end it there.
Okay, great.
Maybe that can be part 2.
Yeah.
Heatherjean and Nikki's like solutions to solve all the world's problems or something like that. But thank you so much for like sharing so openly. And I think one of the beautiful things, as I kind of said at the beginning, is I do genuinely believe that the non-traditional approach to life and career is going to become the norm, just because of the way the world is fast-paced transformation. We have no idea what's going on. And I just love that people listening get the opportunity to learn from people like yourself that have done that already, like the trailblazer non-traditional folks. So thank you for sharing so openly and vulnerably in this conversation. And I can't wait to get back to campus and see what becomes of all the crazy things that we've talked about doing together.
Yeah, I can't wait. Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
Isn't Heatherjean's story really inspiring? I think I learned in this episode that Heatherjean and I are more similar than I ever thought before. Heatherjean, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I love how you manifest the future that you want for yourself, and you actually take time to think and work out what you want the next season to look like. I wonder how we all can do more of that this week. Is there somewhere you want to be in 6 months from now, a month from now, a year from now? And how can we utilize the resources that we have in our hands or the people that we know to take a step and make that happen and not necessarily wait for permission? I don't know what that is for me, but I'd love to hear what that is for you. So that's it for us this week. Thank you so much for listening. If you really enjoyed this episode, I'd really love it if you could follow Heatherjean. Her details are in our show notes. And share this episode with someone else that you think would enjoy this conversation. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.